Good morning, everybody. Welcome to today's webinar. We are just waiting for a few more people to join us. So I'm just going to let a few more people trickle in there, but we've got a great number of attendees today. So just waiting for a few more people to join us before we get cracking. Okay, so firstly, I'd like to welcome everybody back. We've got some familiar names on the attendees list today, so it's great to see that people have found previous webinars useful and are obviously coming back to hear more useful content from different experts in the social care sector. We've also got some new names on the attendees list today, so welcome to you guys. Hopefully you'll find today's session really useful and helpful, and you'll come back and listen to more that we do. We try to do these on a monthly basis, so hopefully we'll be able to see you again and touch on some topics that are really relevant to what it is that you do in the sector. So I've also noticed we've got a few people that sit slightly outside of the social care sector, maybe in the digital and the IT sector. So it's great to have you guys on board as well today. This content has been tailored to social care audience, but the content that and the ideas and lessons that Debbie will be delivering today is absolutely transferable. You can use that in any kind of work setting and work environment and system, but you just need to be able to translate that and apply that to what it is that you do. So on to introducing myself and Debbie. So I'm the host of today's webinar, and as I said, I try to do these on a monthly basis, and I work with some fantastic experts across the social care sector who share lots of lessons with us and ideas and concepts that we can apply in our everyday roles. I'm the senior manager here at AJ Recruitment, and we specialise in stabilising the frontline and management workforces within the care organisations that we work with. And we do that through various different ways, through temporary and permanent recruitment solutions. And we work predominantly with the private and third sector in social care across the north of England, and if it's permanent, usually quite nationally as well. And I'm delighted to say that obviously today we've got our guest speaker, which is Debbie Sorkin. We've had the privilege of seeing Debbie speak previously at an event and found her lessons and the ideas and concepts that around systems leadership really useful, and we've been able to apply that into our business and also carry that forward and work with our customers and help them use those ideas and concepts in what it is that they do as well, to try and improve and stabilise the workforce, and obviously ultimately delivering a higher quality of care and continuity to their service users. So just a quick overview of how to get the best from our time together today. So it's a lot of information to take in. So if you've got a pad and pen, always useful to take as many notes as you can, because obviously you can then reflect on them later and digest that in your own time. There will be a survey to take at the end of the webinar, which is really useful for us because it helps us then make sure that we seek out other experts in topics that you would find really useful and helpful, but also get your feedback as well about the content and if it was engaging, and obviously if it was of use to you. We also will be providing you with a download of this recording. So once it's been edited, we can get that across to you along with the slides. Debbie has kindly said that we can give the slides to you as well, because there's various different links and case studies in there that you would find useful, and hopefully be able to share them with your colleagues who weren't able to make the live session today. So I'm just going to touch on some really useful insights that I've come across over the last few weeks in the recruitment market in social care. It's my job to make sure as a recruitment partner with our customers that we are absolutely tapping into the right sources to find the best quality candidates for them. And that means reviewing and doing a lot of research about the job boards that we use and various different sources, and making sure that we're using the right ones. So obviously in the care sector at the moment, we are all facing staffing challenges. There's just the amount of people that need the care and support, there's not as many people that are willing to do that job. And there's a lot of noise at the moment as well from the government around making it more difficult for the low skilled workers from outside the UK to join join us in the UK and work in sectors such as social care and construction that's going to feel the challenges of that. So we do need to be more aware of what's going on in the marketplace so that we can make sure that we can react to that accordingly. So the Home Secretary has recently set out the plans for the single skill-based immigration system. Obviously that would make it more difficult for the low-skilled workers to come into the UK. So there's still, that's the plans that have been sort of proposed, but obviously it's Brexit, nothing's been fully agreed yet. So it's just to be mindful of that and keep an eye on that as well, if you do have a workforce that does include people from outside the UK. In the news daily, we're seeing obviously stories about the different care homes that are disappearing now, just unable to keep up with their service because of the staffing shortages, and hospitals are also being affected to that as well. Social care and the word competitive are not two phrases that you often hear together, but it is a competitive market at the moment. There is obviously the staffing shortage means that employers need to be on their absolute A game when it comes to attracting employees to come and work for them. So job seekers have more choice than ever before when it comes to care employers to work for. So we need to make sure that the way that your brand and your company is perceived out there in the job market is attractive, and you are offering a work environment and an employment that people would want to come and work for, and also recommend to their friends and family, because they are the best sources of candidate for people who you can retain the longest. And it's also about working smarter to understand how job seekers are behaving in the social care market, because it's very different to, say, the retail market, things like that. People do it for very different reasons, and it's understanding how do job seekers behave in this market, where are they looking for their next role, and where do we need to be seen. So as part of the research that I've been doing recently, really looked into the insights as to where we are getting the best quality workers from. Not applicants, because you can get a lot of applicants, doesn't always mean they're going to convert into a good worker for you. So you need to make sure you're not using sources that just create a lot of noise and a lot of applicants, because that can use a lot of your special time. So you need to make sure that it is actually converting into a good quality worker that's going to add value to your business. So on reviewing that data set, looking at sort of the last back end of the year, we got in contact with one of the main job boards, and Indeed was really helpful with us to give us some really crucial insights as to the applicants in specifically the social care market over the back end of last year. And the data set that we looked at, we really analysed that and then came back with a few sort of recommendations that I think there's a lots of different concepts and ideas of when's the best day to post, when's the best time to post, but I think the market is changing constantly and it's fluid, and we need to be able to react to that. It doesn't mean that what was happening at the beginning of 2018 or the back end of 2017 is what's happening right now. So we need to be absolutely on the pulse with that and reacting accordingly. So first of all, from the data set that we analysed, it suggests that on a Monday to Wednesday are the best days for getting applications in the health and social care sector. So that means that you need to make sure that your job adverts are out at the beginning of the week to make sure that you are capturing the best activity and the number of applicants that are out there. Peak time for applications are 8 a.m. to 10 a.m. So always obviously making sure that you post your adverts first thing. Even if it's you get the best applications on a Tuesday, make sure that they're out late Monday so that your advert is absolutely at the top of the list for when people are there seeking on a Tuesday. So phrases to use. So there's a myriad of different job titles in the social care sector. And we just need to make sure that even if you have a specific job title within your organisation, your adverts need to be able to attract the right people. So you do need to sort of do a bit of A and B testing with your adverts and see which ones get the best reaction. Care assistant and support workers were the most searched terms. So even if your job title sits slightly outside that and the care workers or support assistants or enablers or anything like that, just try and make sure that you keyword your job adverts with the words care assistant and support worker, so that you do appear in a search list when people are actually searching those terms, because that is what job seekers are actually typing in to a search function. So across November and December, there is a steep decline in applications. So if you find that your workforce is destabilised across the Christmas and festive periods, you need to make sure that you are looking at that probably around September, even before that, to make sure that you've got the people in and trained and working. Because if you try and get your adverts out in November to try and cover December, you're going to struggle, because that's the time that people tend not to start looking for new employment. It picks back up again in January, but across November and December there is a steep decline. So just make sure that you plan ahead for that and try to get your adverts out in September and October. Review your sources of job applicants, and are they working for you? This changes over time. As a recruiter, I've been doing this for 15 years. We see that what was working for us one year is not always working for us the next, and things do change. And it's hard to make sure that you always got your finger on the pulse with that also. But what I would suggest is don't always make assumptions. So I had to make a difficult decision this month to cut one of the major job boards that we use, because it just wasn't bringing us the right type of candidates, the quality of candidates that we needed. And in that, you would have assumed, I'm not going to say which job board it was, don't want to get into any legal battles with that, but I do want to make sure that it's the absolute best source for us, and that just was not performing for us. And it is one of the bigger brands. You see it on the TV adverts all the time. And when I went back and challenged that with them, they did say that they didn't have a great hold on the social care audience. Great for retail, construction, things like that, but social care not so much. So I've decided I will pick that back up again when they do some work on that and get better in the social care market. So it's just, don't ever assume, just look at the figures, do some analytics of where your best previous workers have come from, or the people that are currently working for your organisation. 67% of applicants came from mobile devices. So just make sure your job adverts are not too long, because people are doing it on a mobile. They don't want to be scrolling and scrolling and scrolling. Keep them short, punch it, and make sure that people can read that well on their job, on their mobile, sorry. So just make sure that your website is responsive to mobile as well, because that will really help get conversion from people looking at your job advert to actually pressing apply, and moving forward with that. And also checking out the Saving Social Care book that was released by Neil Eastwood. I think it was 2016. That's got some great tips on it, especially if you're in home care, but it also can be translated into care home environments as well. He talks about some real niche ways of not always being too reliant on a job board, because sometimes that can create a lot of noise, but not the best people. He talks a lot about different things that you can do within your workforce to create momentum around recommendations and recommending friends, which are the best source of job applicants. So hopefully you found those key points useful, and you can use them in your recruitment strategy within your organisation and share them with your internal recruitment team. But also, if you are wanting to have a talk through this offline, and you want me to go back through these, or any further points around recruitment, I'm absolutely happy to do that with you. So just reach out to me, and I'll give you my contact details towards the end. So I'm going to pass you across to Debbie now. So good morning, Debbie.
Good morning, Rachel.
Morning.
My slides up here. Just bear with me for a moment.
Yeah, that's fine. Hopefully I've covered everything, obviously, that Debbie will be sharing, and the general gist of it when you applied to come on the webinar. But I'll pass you across to Debbie now, and Debbie, you can talk people through your lessons around systems leadership.
Thanks very much, Rachel. Welcome everyone, and thank you very much for making the time to take part in this webinar, whichever sector you come from. It's great to see so many of you here. I thought we might use this session to think about what it means to lead, mainly in social care, although it is applicable to other sectors, but what it means to lead in social care at the moment using the lens of systems leadership. So looking at what it's like when you're working not just in a department or an organisation, a provider or a commissioner, but in a wider system. So where it's complex, where it might be difficult, where you're not necessarily top dog, you need to use influence, where it might be political, councillors, MPs, national government, where there will be no end of external commentators on what you're doing, not invariably helpful, and no end of internal constraints. So money, staff, rooms, there will be something. We'll focus particularly on systems leadership approaches and how they can help, drawing partly on thinking and research, but mainly on practice from around the country. What people have found really useful and what works, with the emphasis on do's and don'ts and not actions and behaviours. And these will link also and have direct applicability to recruitment and retention. And this is with a view to your having practical tools and techniques that you can take away and use straight away. And that's whether or not you're in social care. At the same time, I'd like to encourage this to be an interactive session. So we do have a chat box here. I'd encourage you to put any thoughts or comments you have there. And we will be using the chat box as we go to get your views on various issues that we're bringing to the fore. But I wanted to start out by just trying to get a bit of context here. Now, just try and bring this along. Hang on. Yikes. Oh, Rachel, it doesn't seem to be working. Sorry.
Just scroll it across with it.
Oh, there it is. Hooray, yes, we've got it. Thank you. Sorry about that. Oh, what relief. So, some context, first of all, from the worlds of social care and health. If you work in social care, even if you work in the NHS, you will know that people's health and well-being is really very little to do with their proximity to the NHS or to healthcare services. It's much more about their general links to work and employment, to education, to social connection, to what's going on in their overall community. That is what actually determines people's overall well-being. This is an infographic from the King's Fund, but public health is also very clear that this is the case. And we are also very clear that this is what is at the heart of what social care does. We celebrate people for who they are and we support them to live the lives that they want to live. And we take it for granted that everyone has the right to a good life. And partly, yes, that will be down to health, but also it will be down to links and employment and social connections and a sense of being able to flourish. I have not seen any social care organisation that puts on its website, we are here to prop up the NHS. However, that is not everyone else's view. There is another view here, and I sometimes call this and social care. This is a tweet from Matt Hancock, Secretary of State for Health and Social Care. And I just draw your attention to what he's saying at the top here. Work for NHS or in social care? I want to hear from you about how we can improve our NHS. He seems to have missed out the phrase or social care here, because social care is not seen as something that is as valuable in and of its own right. The system often perceives social care as almost a Cinderella service. Social care is often seen or portrayed by the media as being A, about older people almost exclusively, and B, about dependency, not about people being encouraged to live the life that they want to live or to live as independently as they can. I'm not actually going to talk about the social care green paper because I don't have imaginary friends, but I will flag up the NHS long-term plan, just by way of context. You can see I've described it here as it's a kind of Godzilla. So it's very large, it can be quite scary looking, it looks very different to what we're used to, and it is quite possibly fictional. Because although there are some very good things in the long-term plan, there's much more of an emphasis on integrated care systems to achieve that triple integration of what they call health with social care and mental health and physical health. There's much more emphasis on community care, and there's much more emphasis on social prescribing and on personal health budgets. But there is a terms and conditions apply here. On page 31 of the plan, it makes it very clear that the long-term plan for the NHS is predicated on adequate social care and public health funding. And as we all know, that is not necessarily the case. So there is an inherent contradiction in the system at the moment between what is wanted or aspired to and what is affordable and what is deliverable. And in those kinds of situations, you can end up feeling like this if you're in social care. You can feel like you're almost physically constrained, squeezed between others, other people, other organisations. You want to make things happen, but you're stuck, or you're not being listened to or even noticed or heard. People aren't doing what they're meant to do or what they promise, so they'll say one thing in one meeting and then go out and do something entirely different. There's no clarity or consistency. There's certainly not a sense of people heading off in the same direction. People are standing around being woolly or bleating. I will stop this metaphor in a moment, about problems, why something can't be done, or why it needs money, usually your money. And in these situations, it can feel daunting, almost overwhelming. But we shouldn't be surprised to see this happening, because this is what it's like when you're working in complexity and when you're working in complex systems. And I want to spend a bit of time looking at this because I think it's important that you realise what you're dealing with here. You can have situations that are simple. That is where one thing absolutely causes another and you know it. So you go into a room, you flick a light switch, the light comes on. That's simple. You can have things that are complicated. So things like open heart surgery, very skilled, need big teams, lots of risk, lots of things can go wrong. But we've done open heart surgery before. We know what to do. There is a causal link here. If we follow these rules and these protocols, we are likely to have success. And if things go wrong, usually we know what's actually gone wrong. In a complex situation, you won't know what to do because it'll be new. There'll be no set of rules or guidance that you can take off the shelf. And sometimes the most important thing you can do is to say to everyone, look, we're in a new situation here. We don't know what to do. Can we just sit down and talk about what our next steps might be? Or you might be in a situation that's called recalcitrant. That is, you've got rubbish systems and rubbish processes, but everybody knows them and everybody's used to them. So everybody works with them or around them. Or you're dealing with issues that have been around forever and nothing you try seems to make any difference. Quite common in the NHS and the 4-hour target in A&E, for example. They're likely to involve lots of different people in different sectors. There's often a political dimension of one kind or another. No one person is or can be in charge, no matter what it says on a project plan. There's nothing linear about things. So you'll have a big initiative that you think will make a massive difference and it makes very little difference in practice, or you'll do something very small and it'll create a change over and above what you thought possible. Sometimes you can't describe what the issue actually is, you're not sure where it begins or ends, or you'll feel on the outside looking in, you're kind of banging on the glass, but nobody is listening or you're not being heard. So there are two things to notice if you're working in complexity and if these kinds of issues ring bells with you. First of all, this is difficult stuff to do, okay? So give yourselves a break. What you're doing here is really difficult. And secondly, when things are difficult and they keep on being difficult day after day, there's an awful tendency to try and avoid them in some way or magic them away. Could you just write me this report? Could you just somehow take this problem away? So don't be surprised that it's difficult and that you meet people trying to avoid work or to push back against it. You can think of a system as being like a simple animal, like an amoeba. So this is very amoeba here. And as you can see, Barry isn't necessarily very bright, but he can feed, he can move around, he can reproduce, and like a system, he's totally adapted to his environment. A system is adapted to its environment. So you come along and you want to change things for the better outcomes for service users, lower costs, really good reasons. The natural response of the system is not necessarily going to be, that's a fantastic idea, let's do it straight away. The natural response of the system might actually be to kill it, because it will be perceived as a threat, and not necessarily a threat of change, but of loss. People don't necessarily fear change, but they do fear loss. And yes, it can be loss of job, but it could be something much more evanescent, something about loss of professional status, loss of familiarity in terms of colleagues or where you work. It doesn't need to be rational to be real in people's minds. It can be perceived. So often it's a really good idea to go out for a coffee with somebody beforehand, before you're planning to do any kind of change in a system or suggest things, to work out where the losses might potentially be. Because otherwise you will tend to get smoke blown in your eyes from all sorts of directions. And here are some of the kinds of things you might come up against. This isn't an exhaustive list, but I suspect it will ring bells with many of you. So you can get deflection tactics, default behaviours. If you ever have a restructure, this is a great way of deflecting away from real work. If you have a restructuring, it will take up everybody's time and attention, and you won't do any real work for ages. Or mantras, let's have integration. If we just have integration, that will solve all our ills. Obscure language is the other thing to watch for. My law is that if it sounds like guff, it probably is. Push back against it if and where you can. It's hard, but if you're in a meeting and it's acronym central or things are not clear, push back against this and make sure that people are absolutely clear in what they're saying. You can get people doing the wrong thing busily, having endless meetings or endlessly delayed meetings. Love to talk to you, is 3 months' time okay? Using governance or abusing governance. So you'll get even to a suggestion for change. That's really interesting. Can you tell me the terms of reference? Can we have a steering group on that? Defining an issue as technical, or denying a problem exists. Shooting the messenger is a good one as well. You don't need to shoot very many messengers before everybody gets the message. So I said this would be an interactive session. What I would like you to do now is let's take a few minutes for this, and then in the chat box, if you could identify what's complex about what you're working with at the moment, either in social care or in IT or in other areas. So not the details, just which aspects of this resonate with you. What's new? What's political? Where are you working with rubbish systems? Where are you not sure what the issue actually is? Where are you seeing resistance here? So I'm going to hand over now to you to have to put your thoughts in the chat box. Thank you. I'll give us a couple more minutes. If anyone wants to think about this, or if anyone wants to brave the chat box. Mm-hmm. Oh, dealing with increased staff sickness, yes. Yes. And quality recruitment, some things that have been around for a long time. Thanks, Tony. They've seen it all before, been promised change, and it hasn't happened, so people disengaged, yes. Thanks, Angela. Too many things going on at the same time. Similar but different. And there's a question of then where do you actually give your attention? And thank you. Oh, lots of people now. Competition for the same pools, yes. But to develop services which involve change with no line management responsibility. So yes, Judith, this is for you how you use influence. Right, thank you, everyone. Thank you for all of those. Hold on to those thoughts because they really describe working in complexity and trying to juggle multiple things at once and not necessarily having the positional authority to do much about them. So what can you do? Well, one thing that I want to describe to you, hang on, I should just bring this back. Rachel, I'm sorry, I'm having difficulty seeing this.
The slide not moving.
Hang on. Can I press this again? Oh. Can you just bear with us for one moment, please? Thank you. Oh, there we go. Thank you. I'll come back. But, so what can you do in these situations? Well, what I would like to suggest to you to think about, whether you're looking at recruitment, at retention, of engaging staff, of working more broadly, is think about what are called systems leadership approaches, because these can really help you lead in complexity. I sometimes call systems leadership the god of small things, because what it says is you can make small amounts of progress, marginal gains over time. So go for little bits of progress, don't go for a massive leap. And think about how you can use this then to make marginal gains, and thinking about margins not just in terms of limits, but in terms of boundaries. So systems leadership is about how you lead across boundaries. So between social care and the NHS, social care and housing, public health, any other sector or profession. But fundamentally, this is how you lead when you are not in charge. And when all your plans and ideas come up against those two things of real life and other people, and where you don't have positional authority yourself, there's no lever that you can pull. So it's a great tool to have in your armoury. It's not a silver bullet, but we have the evidence from research and evaluation and stories from around the country that it works. Fundamentally, it can change the way people think, and therefore what they do, and therefore what actually happens on the ground. And it does this through the way it's defined. Systems leadership is about the collaborative leadership of a network of people. So it's a network, it's not a hierarchy. This is how you park hierarchy for a bit. You don't say it doesn't exist, but it's a way of parking it. So anyone can be in this network. And it includes service users and families, and anyone can be in the network. And it's about creating a common purpose. This is fundamental. This is how you get people to give up their organisational advantage and think about wider goals, and how you get everybody moving in the same direction. This is how you engage people to come and work for you. It's really understanding what it is that you want to do together and why, and what it means for every one of you. So what it means for anyone coming to join your organisation as an apprentice or a care assistant. What are they looking to do? How are they looking to contribute to that common purpose? That's how you work across health and social care and housing and employment and other sectors in pursuit of that goal. A nice question to start with is, what do we want life to be like for people in our place? And that can be our organisation, it can be our geographical place. And for people, that includes staff and service users and their families. So start with an open question and you're much more likely to get a different answer. And this is about the relationships that you have with other people and the trust that you thereby build and the influence that you thereby have. It's not necessarily about power relationships. Those things will always be there, but think of it much more about using relationships and trust to influence the system and to get it to change. And doing this in small steps, so allowing for solutions to emerge and then think, how do I work on that? So if you think of using systems leadership around relationships and common purpose and building trust and influencing the system, it can help you really change the way the system operates. And how do you do this? Well, a few lessons. This is what common purpose looked like in North Merseyside. So not we will beat the 4-hour target, but how do we have more people in the right place at the right time to meet their needs? Yes, it includes not having people on trolleys, but also how do we get the right residential care for people? How do we get the right home care for people? What does this mean for the way we deploy staff across the system and the way we deploy funding across the system? And it had very practical effects. So they deployed nurses across social care to alleviate winter pressures. They gave more money to social care and to mental health as a result. So this is not a woolly thing. Absolutely start with common purpose and build from there. And once you've got your common purpose, work that system and make it work for you. See yourselves as being in a system. You don't necessarily need positional power to do this. A network looks much more like this picture on the left than it does an organisational chart. It's much more chaotic, it's much more kinetic, it's changing all the time. But don't worry about that. The only thing you need to think about is, who is in my network here? Who thinks the same way as I do? Who's in my coalition of the willing, in other words? And then if I want to get over to the right-hand side from the left, who can do some of the heavy lifting for me? Who can be my messenger here? Who's in other people's networks as well? Who can influence for me? And see a system as something that can adapt. Don't be like Volvo, whose driverless cars were confused by kangaroos when they previously introduced them to elk and caribou. See a system as something that you can influence. Don't have imposter syndrome here. Don't give in to other people's views of social care in particular, but see a system as something that you can influence by the relationships that you have and the information you give each other and the trust and the influence you thereby build. So you are not powerless in this at all. Another good thing to do is to consciously use systems leadership behaviours. You are what you do, you are what you model. You will know that from your own recruitment and retention practices. This is not about being the big jazz hands leader, extrovert from the front. I sometimes describe this as like leadership for introverts. So it's about being thoughtful and calm and supporting and enabling other people and being confident working in the background. And there are some things that we know work really well here. So it's absolutely fine to ground what you do in your values. So ground your recruitment and retention in your values. You're not doing this because it's a job. You're doing this because you think this is the right thing to do. You absolutely will. And if you marry your values with your common purpose, that will keep you in for the long haul. There will be another initiative, another counsellor along in a moment, but keep going here and that will see you through. It's about standing back a bit as well, listening and observing, getting off the dance floor and onto the balcony, making time for reflection, thinking what is really going on here and how can I influence it. It's about sense making for other people and putting things together in new ways. And it's about behaving in ways that lead to change and using personal qualities that support distributed leadership, that is leadership of a lot of people throughout your organization and beyond, rather than just expecting it all to reside with you or with one other deus ex machina. And it has implications, and I'd really encourage you to download this summary paper which talks about these behaviours in more detail. So don't jump to solutions here. It is fine to take control if you've got an emergency, but usually if you're dealing with something complex, the role of leadership is not to provide answers, but to ask questions. If you jump to solutions, or if you try and take command all the time, what happens is that people stop taking decisions. They wait for you. This is a quote from the NHS, but it would apply in any sector. You create a culture of people who are terrified of making decisions because you can't be held to account for making no decision, but you can if you make a decision. And if you're supporting in enabling other people and you're looking at issues from a system-wide perspective, then avoiding a blame culture, however tempting and cathartic it is something to really aim for. It's difficult because we really like blame in this country. It's so simple, it's so cathartic, it makes for great headlines, but try and avoid it if you can. I'm not talking here about avoiding accountability, but what I would say is that a blame culture really will be all about avoiding accountability. This is my favourite slide, I think, of all time. It's from Keith Grinch. You've made a mistake. Will it show? No. Bury it. Problem avoided. You've made a mistake. Will it show? Yes. Can you hide it? Yes. Conceal it before somebody else finds out. Problem avoided. You've made a mistake. Will it show? Yes. Can you hide it? No. Can you blame someone else? Yes. Get in first with your version of events. Problem avoided. If you want to stop learning as an organisation or as a system and you want to stop improving, then have a blame culture by all means. It's the quickest way to do that. If you really want to learn and improve, look at things from a system basis and try and avoid pinning the blame on particular individuals. I'm not saying this should never happen, but quite often there will be system-wide issues even when there are particular individuals at fault. So try and learn from what you do. The other thing to do is to tell your story. I am not talking about, I met this bloke down a pub. It is for introverts too, and it is one of the most powerful tools in your armoury. This is how you influence people. This is how you influence people in senior positions and how you bring people with you to join in action. You start with your story of yourself. Why are you doing this? Why are you in social care? Why is this important? And then you link it to story of us. So why this matters to people in a community, why this matters to people in positions of power. And then link it to story of now. And this is why we need to take action now. So you're not just giving an anecdote. You're saying, this is why we need, therefore, to do something, whether it's more money or more people or whatever it is. This is why we need to do something now. This is a whistle-stop tour around this, but any event that you can go on that enables you to develop your public narrative or enables people in your teams to do this, get on this. It really, really is important. And if you behave in these ways, you can end up with very, very different results and very, very different outcomes. I won't go through all of these, But I just wanted to draw your attention to Calderdale Council. They were working with school children. They wanted to improve levels of physical activity among schoolgirls. They started out thinking they would want aerobics and Zumba, and then they did a great thing. They got off the dance floor and onto the balcony. They thought, who isn't in the room? Who needs to be? And they thought what we should do is actually train the schoolgirls in research methods and get them to do the research. And they did, and they ended up with taekwondo and boxercise. Very different results from what they would have got if they'd just gone ahead and done what they thought they ought to do. So you can end up with very, very different conversations and very, very different outcomes. I'd really encourage you to try these things. They work in recruitment and retention and right across the board in social care and in other sectors. Just make a start. You don't need for everything to be perfect. And give people agency. People own what they create. So if you can allow people in your teams, new people, established people in your teams to try things out in real work, they will have much greater ownership. And this then goes for any sector than if you're just trying to deliver things from on high or via diktat. You can start anywhere. The key thing is just to make a start and see where it leads to. Keep making the connections in your networks and try things that are new, because the process we use to get to the future determines the future we get. If we keep doing things in the same way, we shouldn't be surprised if we get the same outcomes. There will always be good reasons not to do something. History, culture, geography, if it's big, it will take time, it will feel messy. That's not a reason not to do things. It's not a reason not to try something new or to work in a systems way. The key thing is always to revert back to common purpose and your values and the behaviours. And you're not alone here. You're not starting from scratch. There's lots and lots of information here to help you and stories from people who've done similar things to you and are facing similar issues. And at the back of these slides, there are links to many of these reports. And the key thing is do some real work here. Don't avoid work. Work with your coalition of the willing, people in your network, people who think the way you do, go and towards a common purpose. You might need to choose a battle, so start anywhere. Go out for coffee with people. I always say this is as important as the formal meetings. Engage with other sectors beyond the obvious ones. Use fail-safe experiments, little ways of working that won't bring the house down if they don't work. And by the way, if we have a lot of innovation, we should be prepared for things not to work. And use narratives, tell your story, and frames to change perspectives. And I want to talk a bit about frames and reframing. This is a Gary Larson cartoon. It is from the 1980s originally. And in it, the caveman is at the front is pointing out to the other cavemen. Now this end, the spikes on the end of a stegosaurus's tail, is called the thagomizer, after the late Thag Simmons. Up until that time, those spikes on the end of a stegosaurus's tail didn't have a scientific name. After the cartoon was published, paleontologists and other scientists started using the term thagomizer to describe those spikes to the extent that now that's become the accepted scientific term. Once people get an idea in their heads about something or about a person or a group of people, that is a frame. It's a set of concepts and ideas that allow us to accord meaning to other organisations, to other sectors. So it's how the NHS sees local government or social care and vice versa. It's how individuals in an organisation see themselves. It's how GPs see themselves. It's how GPs see themselves vis-à-vis community services or acute services. It's a mental shortcut. We all use them. They will prime for association. So once you've got the idea in your head, everybody similar will be seen through the same light. They will trump facts and rationality every time. They're often based in metaphor, so people see each other as sort of different animals or cars. And they can be tough to shift. But the great thing is they are not immutable. They can change. And once a new frame gets established, it suddenly becomes the new common sense. And in case it seems woolly to you, it can have profound and practical consequences. So in Bournemouth, the council framed homelessness as a public nuisance. So they put bars on the benches and they played loud music in the bus station to encourage people from sleeping rough. In Worthing, they saw homelessness as a public health issue. So every councillor with responsibility for planning agreed that what had been a nurses' home could become a homelessness hostel, because they saw it, they framed it as a different issue. They framed it in terms of public health. And in case you're tempted to say, but I'm an intelligent person, I'm a rational person, this doesn't matter to me. Oh, yes, it does. Oh, yes, it does. This isn't about lying, but it is about thinking about the frame you want to use and how you might change it. You can't just negate a frame. You can't just say, no, it's not. You need to start from where people are, and a messenger might not be you. It might be a doctor. It might be a nurse, it might be a service user or a family member. But think about how you reframe things. And again, at the end of these slides, there's a longer reframing exercise that's very practical that you and your teams can take away. Don't discount the frames that people are using, how you see other people and organisations and how they are seeing you, because that will act as the stop for arguments getting through or being heard. So, I now wanted us to go back to the chat box, please, and write out either the worst media headline you can think of in relation to your work at the moment or in relation to your organisation, or the worst tweet you can imagine as well, no more than 10 words. And then write how you might reframe either the headline or the tweet to change the story or prevent it getting a foothold in the first place. So just have a think about this first of all, and then let's see what comes up in the chat box. What's a really bad headline about social care, about your place, about the NHS, or a really bad tweet? These can be real or imagined, but they should be short. And let's see where we get to. This is just a very, very quick exercise in reframing. Thank you, Colin. Well done. Average care seats now exceed £1,000 per week. You had that in a headline in a local paper or online, and you were reading that. That would be scary. So how might you change that, or reframe it to change the story? Of providing care now exceeds 70. Yes, absolutely. Cost of providing care, or proper care. Care sector determined to provide adequate care, phrasing it in that kind of way. Thank you. Oh, Joel, thank you. Who wants to take in the world for the world? Digital technologies, they help at the same time deliver better care. Thank you. That's brilliant. Thank you. Would say quality care. Thank you. I knew you'd be good at this. Any more for any more? But you get the idea. This isn't about lying or spinning. It's about really thinking about the frame that you want to use here, and what's the argument that you want to get out to a councillor, to an MP, to people in your local community. It really repays before you go into any meeting or you're thinking about how you want to recruit and retain people. What is the frame that you want to use? Because we know the frame in which social care is seen at the moment, and it's not necessarily a good one. And if I could change anything, it would be to change the frame in which social care is regularly portrayed in the media. So I want just to summarise. Hang on in there, I think, is what I would say as a basic. So understand that you are probably working in a complex environment, a complex situation. And if it is complex, not everything is, but if it is complex, then expect resistance, expect pushback, and avoid kind of just standard responses. So notice if you're getting resistance in various ways. It may not be stuff you need to file under R for random. It may be a way of avoiding real work and avoiding engaging with complexity. So start with relationships and trust and common purpose, and thinking about things from a systems leadership standpoint. Once you've got that common purpose, make that system work for you. See yourselves as people who can influence the system. You're not just waiting for the system to do stuff for you. And if you can inculcate that in your staff as well, that will be hugely beneficial. Consciously practice systems leadership behaviours. Tell your story, get your public narrative out there. I know there will always be good reasons not to do things, but start anywhere and don't wait for things to be perfect. And there's lots and lots of examples and information you can take about how to do this. And use the fine art of framing and reframing to change perspectives. If you do have any more questions or comments, please do put these into the chat box. But otherwise, I'd be very happy to take questions or comments outside of here. And I just wanted to say thank you very much indeed. And I'll now hand back to Rachel. Thank you.
Thank you for that, Debbie. That was really, really interesting, and took some great lessons from that we can start to implement in the business immediately. Let me just get my slides back on there for you. Okay, so just to go back through the sort of key lessons that obviously Debbie's just been through, which is there's so much there to go with. There's so much information. So thank you for that, Debbie. I'm sure we're all going to benefit from using that in the business, in our different systems and settings that we work within. Now, the three things to take away from today for us, I would say in our business, is that systems leadership is about working together on the basis of a common purpose and using the relationships and trust to influence other people. And that goes with all parts of it. That's people with inside your organisation, with outside, the immediate external people that have an influence to your system. And to see yourself as working in a system and making that system work for you, but also displaying the right behaviours that lead to change, because the more that you display those behaviours, the more you will see the people around you will start to mirror that behaviour as well. Now, we had the privilege of, like I mentioned earlier, seeing Debbie speak about these lessons at an event, the VODG event last year, and immediately saw the benefit of this and how we could then integrate that into our business, but also how we could then sort of follow that through with customers as well, and start to leverage on that and see if people could use that within their organisation and share. And I think this is the great thing about these webinars and this content, and having people like Debbie sharing their lessons, is we all learn from this, and then we can then pass that on and share our knowledge. And one of the ways that we did that is we used that within a adult social care provider that we work as a recruitment partner with. And prior to our involvement with the organisation, they were using agencies a lot. They were spending a lot of money, and they had a lot of different agencies. And this is the part where Debbie obviously talks about when there's a lot of different people involved. It's an inconsistent message, an inconsistent service, and it can have a detrimental effect on the way that the system works. So they were using a lot of agencies, and if you remember from the A&E case study that Debbie mentioned, they just didn't have the right people in place. They didn't have enough of the right people in place in their service. They actually had 16 vacancies within their service, which obviously affects continuity and the quality of care that's delivered to the people that use their service. And with a high staff turnover, that can have a knock-on effect to other people that are working within that service, because they then take on that added pressure and that added workload. So the way that we use systems leadership with our customer was all about reframing. So obviously Debbie spoke about how some people can have a conception or an understanding of one group of people and can then use that to sort of brand everybody the same. And it's all about making sure that, you know, look at people and companies and organisations on an individual basis. So what we had to do with that is sort of reframe the way that they was viewing any sort of recruitment support that they could get. The term agencies is obviously, it has its reputation in the market, and we're trying to obviously work away from that and work on a recruitment partner basis with our customers. And it was about reframing that with the sort of senior leaders within their business, within their internal recruitment team, and showing them the real benefits of working on a recruitment partner basis, and how partnership working can really help an organisation move forward and overcome any obstacles like a workforce issue, which is what a lot of organisations in the sector are obviously suffering from at the moment. So we worked with the leaders in the organisation about reframing their opinion and perception of a recruitment partner. They mirrored that behaviour with other people in their company that was responsible for working with different recruitment partners and agencies, and started to work with them on the benefit of how to do that properly, so that you don't want loads of different sort of fingers in the pie. You want to make sure there's one system in place that works, and everybody's working towards that, and it takes a while for that to adjust, but once it does, you immediately start to see the benefits. And we started working with that, and on the 28th of November 2018, we then started to work with them on getting the candidates in place, getting their interviews booked in, and we successfully filled the 16 places that they had in the vacancies, and now the service is fully staffed. They're no longer reliant on agencies, which is a massive shift from where that organisation was, and that was just around reframing and changing the perception and how they were working with different partners outside the organisation. And a saving of over £108,000 is huge, and nobody has a budget to be wasting on expensive resources that obviously, if you work correctly and in the right way, can solve that issue long term. So obviously we keep in touch with them now, but they are fully staffed, and they are have a stabilised workforce, and the people that benefit from that ultimately is the people that use their service users. So that it was great for us to start using that straight away after the event, and we're also working with other customers in that way as well. So if you want to talk with me offline about how that works and how you could use that in your organisation, absolutely happy to do that. Just to share my contact details with you here, obviously send these on to you after the webinar's finished, but anything to do with any of the recruitment insights that I shared with you at the beginning of the webinar, but also how you can use this, the lessons from Debbie today in your recruitment strategy as well. I'd be absolutely happy to do that with you offline. In addition to this, Debbie's also part of our Social Care Knowledge Hub group on LinkedIn. It's a great space on LinkedIn where there's we do it on a sort of invitation only basis, and you can request to join. We'll obviously approve anybody that's on the webinar today to join, but there's a whole myriad of different experts in the sector in that group who are daily sharing different lessons like Debbie is today, different news articles that come up, and it's a great one-stop shop really to get all the resource that you need. And also for you to share your best practices, if you've got any hints and tips that's worked well for you, to share with your social care peers It's a great place for you to do that. So I'd really recommend, if you're on LinkedIn, we'll send you an invitation to that after the webinar. So from today, just remember to, obviously you will get a survey at the end of this webinar. It's really useful for us, if you can complete that for us, I'd be really thankful for that. But also for you to give ideas for future topics, because we're always trying to bring content that's absolutely useful for you. So if you've got any recommendations of the sort of pressing topics in the sector at the moment that you'd love to learn more about, just let us know on the survey and we can absolutely source that for you and get that on in our future webinars. Or if you know anybody who think you'd make a great speaker on a webinar, or if you want to be a guest speaker on the webinar, do get in touch with me or put that on the survey as well. As promised, once the recording of this is fully being downloaded and edited, I will be able to get that across to you so you can look back on this, redigest it, share it with your colleagues or anybody else you think would benefit from this knowledge, and that you can use it as a tool then to start to obviously implement systems leadership in your organisation. There's lots of links on Debbie's slides that you'll be able to use to access different resources that will help you start to implement that straight away. Debbie is absolutely happy for you to get in contact with her in relations to system leadership. If you've got any questions or any hints and tips that you want around how to get started and how to get this implemented, Debbie, you said you're quite happy, aren't you, for them to get in contact with you?
Absolutely, yes.
Yeah, so we've got Debbie's email address here, Twitter and website. So anything like that, please do get in contact with Debbie directly, or I can pass your details across to Debbie if you wish, and Debbie will get in touch with you too. So thank you for your time today. It's been, as I'm sure you will agree, absolutely great content from Debbie, really good useful stuff, and I'm hoping to get that even more implemented into our workplace, and I'm sure you are too. So any feedback on that, thank you, and have a great day. Thank you, Debbie.
Thanks, Rachel.
Thank you, everybody. Bye.
Bye-bye.